Hello everyone, and welcome to Whispering Reapers. Today we bring you 5 true sleepover horror stories that will rattle your nerves and linger in your mind long after you've turned off the lights. This is a place where twisted tales take shape, where the seemingly ordinary becomes the very substance of nightmares. Prepare for an unsettling journey into the deep-seated fears that often hide behind friendly gatherings, laughter, and the warmth of familiar settings. Many of us have memories of those carefree nights spent at a friend's house, telling stories, giggling at jokes, and creating memories intended to last a lifetime. Yet sometimes the line between fun and fear is blurred when unexplainable events creep into the night. When the lights go out, the house grows quiet and the dark corners of the world seem to stir with a malignant energy. Small things, a faint scratching sound at the window, a tiny creak of a floorboard, can seize your attention. You might try to convince yourself it's only the house settling in for the night or the relentless wind outside, but in these tales, it isn't. What you consider ordinary might just be the beginning of something terrible. In the next 5 stories, we'll explore unsettling events that occurred during average get-togethers. Each one unravels the thin veneer of safety that friends, sleeping bags, and popcorn are supposed to represent. Each horrifying account, while wrapped in the ordinary pretense of a sleepover, reveals dark forces and chilling truths. So find a comfortable spot, silence your surroundings if you can, and let the dread seep in as we bring you 5 tales that prove sometimes the scariest moments happen when you're simply trying to have fun with friends. Join me as we descend into these true accounts, but remember this, once you finish listening, you might never look at a simple sleepover the same way again. Story 1. The Inescapable Silhouette. I was around 13 when our group of friends decided to hold a big sleepover at my friend Daniel's house. He lived in a quiet suburban area that seemed completely normal during the day. At dusk, it still felt safe in that cozy suburban way. The sidewalks neatly lined with street lamps, front lawns meticulous, and houses that stood as calm silhouettes in the fading light. Yet once darkness completely descended, a different feeling washed over everything. In the hush of night, the shadows seemed more pronounced, as though consciousness drained from the neighborhood, leaving behind only the lonely hum of a distant car or the sudden bark of a dog tethered in a nearby yard. We planned to spend the first part of the evening playing board games, telling jokes, and devouring pizza. It was a typical teenage gathering. The laughter was loud and the conversation easy. We talked about school gossip, recounted funny incidents with teachers, and traded friendly insults. Jackson, one of us, was particularly eager to share the ghost stories he had heard from older cousins. He boasted about how he never got scared. We all rolled our eyes in good humor. Eventually, we dimmed the lights and piled onto the living room floor, using beanbag chairs and oversized pillows to make ourselves comfortable. Daniel's parents had retired to their bedroom. The house grew still, illuminated only by a faint glow from a solitary lamp in the corner and the flickering TV screen. That was when Jackson launched into his ghost stories, delighting in the way we half laughed and half cringed at the eerie details. He spoke of revengeful spirits, restless apparitions, and fleeting shapes seen out of the corner of an unsuspecting eye. As the night wore on, Daniel's younger sister Lisa joined us for a moment. She was about 7 or 8 with long braids and a shy smile. Lisa told us she had heard tapping noises on her bedroom window. She stared wide-eyed at the shadows flickering across the hallway. We teased her a bit, but she was serious. She said the tapping had become more frequent every night. She tried telling her parents, but they dismissed it as either her imagination or the normal noises an old window might make. At that time, we chalked it up to childlike paranoia. After that short interruption, Lisa returned to her room while the rest of us pushed the coffee table aside to create more space for everyone. As we settled down, the living room's atmosphere thickened with a sudden wave of heaviness, as if the place were gradually surrendering to the late hour. Jackson, not wanting to lose his captive audience, decided to up the scare factor by telling a more violent, macabre tale. At first we played along, yet the deeper he went, the less entertaining it felt. There was something about the quiet tension in the room and the seriousness in his voice that finally disturbed me. Even though I wanted to shrug it off, goosebumps raced up my arms. I couldn't shake off the sense we were inviting something unholy into Daniel's home. Midway through Jackson's story, the TV, which had been set to a low volume, abruptly lost reception. The screen fizzled into static without warning. We all paused, a strange hush overtaking us. Daniel tried changing the channel, but every station was pure static now. He mumbled something about the cable acting up from time to time, but I noticed him exchange a nervous glance with Jackson. I tried not to let my imagination run rampant, but the coincidence was unsettling, especially in the midst of these ghost stories. Suddenly, Lisa's fearful shriek cracked the silence. It was loud, piercing, and genuine. We jumped to our feet and rushed toward her bedroom. The hallway was pitch black, so Daniel flipped on the light, and we found Lisa trembling on the bed with tears streaming down her face. She was pointing at her window, trying to catch her breath. We moved to the window, but the curtains were drawn. When Daniel carefully parted them, we saw nothing but the murky shapes of neighboring houses and the blackness of the sky. We tried to calm Lisa down, telling her nothing was there, but she insisted she had seen a face. A pale, gaunt face pressed to the glass, peering right at her. By then, Daniel's parents had arrived. They comforted Lisa and promised to stay with her until she fell asleep. We all retreated to the living room, shaken yet clinging to rational explanations. Perhaps Lisa's half-asleep mind conjured a nightmare. Perhaps the reflection of a tree or a passing car's headlights had spooked her. Still, I couldn't shake off the oppressive feeling. Something about the night felt wrong. Daniel's dad checked outside Lisa's window, shining a flashlight on the backyard. All he could see were the rows of carefully pruned bushes, a small stone path, and nothing else out of the ordinary. Satisfied that no one was lurking, he came back in and told us to settle down. We tried to resume our fun, but it was no use. Our playful spirit had been replaced with nervous chatter. Jackson hesitantly returned to his seat, but he didn't continue his story. Instead, he was quiet, fiddling with the hem of his sweater. The invasive static on the TV persisted. We switched it off and decided to play music from Daniel's phone speaker instead. As the clock neared midnight, we started feeling drowsy, though a tense aura still draped over us. I eventually dozed off against a pillow. I dreamed of wandering in a foggy space, hearing a rhythmic tapping noise that sped up, then slowed down. The sound seemed to be drawing me, beckoning me deeper into that grey nothingness. I felt weightless, suspended in dread, until a faint whisper echoed in my ear. I couldn't catch the words, but the voice was sharp, urgent, almost like a warning. The next moment, I snapped awake, my pulse racing. The room was silent, except for the soft breathing of my friends sleeping around me. Daniel was frantically shaking my shoulder, urging me to listen. There it was, a faint but distinct tapping sound coming from one of the windows in the living room. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate, insistent. My mouth went dry. I glanced around, noticing that Jackson was also wide awake, staring at the window with wide eyes. The tapping grew more forceful, as if someone was out there demanding to be let in. My stomach clenched and a cold sweat formed on the back of my neck. Daniel was about to switch on the lamp, but I grabbed his hand, shaking my head vigorously. I couldn't explain my reasoning, but I was terrified at the idea of whoever or whatever was out there seeing us more clearly. Jackson, ignoring my caution, crawled stealthily across the floor to peer through a gap in the curtains. At first he looked confused, maybe even startled. Then his eyes widened in sheer horror. He scrambled backward, nearly stepping on his sleeping bag. When we asked him what he saw, he stammered that there was a figure standing in the yard, tall, inhumanly thin, wearing what appeared to be a dark, tattered cloak or robe. But the scariest detail, Jackson whispered, was the face, nearly white with hollow eyes that gleamed with a faint reflection of moonlight. Our hushed confusion turned into raw terror when the figure bent its head to look inside as if searching for our movement behind the curtains. The tapping ceased. The house became oppressively quiet, as if even the walls held their breath. Then came a slow, tortured, scraping sound along the window glass like fingernails or something sharp tracing a circle. It lasted for a few agonizing seconds, then stopped. All of us were frozen. Daniel turned on the lamp, illuminating our terrified faces. One of my friends, Carla, awoke with a jolt, sensing our collective fear. She stared at us in wide-eyed confusion. I gestured for her to keep silent. We listened carefully, hearts pounding. That's when we heard footsteps around the side of the house. Heavy footfalls, pacing over the grass, circling the perimeter, and occasionally pausing. It sounded like someone or something was stopping to peer into the different windows. Eventually, we heard a rustling noise near the back door, a faint rattling of the handle. My breath caught in my throat. We had locked the doors, that was certain, but the sheer determination of whoever was out there had me doubting the security of a simple lock. Daniel whispered that we should wake up his parents immediately. Normally, for any threat to the house, we would have done that in an instant. But in the grip of panic and confusion, we just sat there, hoping the intruder would go away on its own. The footsteps lingered a while longer, then seemed to retreat toward the fence. We dared not move or speak as we heard them slowly fade into the distance. Eventually, everything was silent again. No more tapping, no more rattling, nothing. We let go of the breath we'd been collectively holding. Still, the tension in the air was palpable. We decided against investigating or going outside. We stayed huddled together in the living room, switching on all the lights. By then, no one wanted to sleep. We kept vigil, occasionally whispering our fears, jumping at every minor noise in the house. When the first hint of dawn broke, Daniel's dad found us on the floor with tired, bloodshot eyes. We explained what had happened. At first, he seemed skeptical, but he walked around the yard. He found something that made his face pale. There were footprints near Lisa's window and some deep scratches on the glass so fresh they still caught the early morning light. The marks looked like they'd been made by something sharp, a metal tool or unnaturally long nails. The footprints, on the other hand, were so elongated they looked abnormal. Most haunting was that there were no signs of these prints leading away from the window. They simply appeared, then vanished as though their maker had materialized and dematerialized right there. Daniel's parents called the police, who took a quick report but found no further evidence. They advised everyone to keep the doors and windows locked and call if anything else happened. That day, we were all in a daze. None of us stayed for another night. We were supposed to continue the sleepover for the rest of the weekend, but no one wanted to be there after that experience. My parents came to pick me up, and I recall feeling so relieved at the sight of our car, almost as if stepping outside would put me immediately into safer territory. None of us slept well for weeks after. For a long time, Lisa wouldn't stay in her bedroom at night. If forced to do so, she'd keep the lights on until she dozed off. Jackson changed entirely. He stopped telling those ghost stories, hardly ever joked, and seemed introspective and spooked by minor things. Daniel's parents installed motion sensor lights around the property and triple-checked every window at night. Eventually, normalcy returned, at least on the surface. But to this day, whenever I hear an unexpected tapping on a window, my heart leaps, and I'm reminded of that horrifying night. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if we had looked outside at the wrong moment, or if the intruder had managed to get inside. Some nights the memory of that pale face pressed against the glass returns, and my stomach churns with a fresh wave of dread. My parents were strict when it came to sleepovers, so I didn't have many until I was nearly 15. One of my first experiences staying the night with friends happened at Sasha's house, a sprawling home that was one of the oldest in our town. Legend had it the place had been built a century ago by a wealthy merchant, complete with secret storage rooms and a large backyard rimmed by ancient oak trees. Its exterior was painted beige and had a slightly peeling facade from decades of weather, while its inside was a mix of modern renovations and vintage charm. The floors still creaked, and some parts of the house had that persistent old wood smell. We arrived on a Friday afternoon. There were 5 of us, including Sasha. We set down our overnight bags in her bedroom, which had tall windows overlooking that imposing backyard. The plan was simple. Watch some movies, play truth or dare, snack to our heart's content, and then finally sleep, or at least try to. Sasha's parents greeted us warmly, offering homemade cookies, telling us we could explore the house if we were curious. Most of the doors were unlabeled, leading to random storage rooms or half-renovated areas. The house had long corridors, surprising archways, and tiny, cramped staircases that led to the attic or the basement. One curious feature was a second staircase leading from the kitchen to a part of the upper floor. Sasha's parents said it used to be the servants' entrance many decades prior. We delighted in exploring the historical quirks for a time, but with each narrow hallway, our imaginations soared. We joked about seeing ghosts or hearing phantom footsteps. It was all harmless fun at first, the kind of silly excitement teenagers get when exploring something old and mysterious. When night fell, we gathered in the living room to binge-watch horror movies. The giant windows overlooked the front yard, where a single lamppost cast feeble light across the lawn. Every so often a car would pass by, momentarily illuminating the room in a stream of headlights. The ambience felt perfect for a few spooky flicks. By midnight, we'd thoroughly spooked ourselves, so we relocated to Sasha's bedroom. There was a hushed sense of excitement. We were giggling at tensions from the movies, but something else was stirring. A faint sense that this house harbored more than just old walls. Sasha's bedroom was large, with an ensuite bathroom and a walk-in closet. We turned off most of the lights, leaving only a string of fairy lights draped along the wall, giving the room a gentle glow. We settled onto mattresses and sleeping bags, munching on potato chips while we gossiped and told ghost stories. Sasha took the lead, sharing how her older relatives claimed the house was haunted by a woman who perished there from an illness many decades back. Supposedly, she had wandered the halls, delirious and calling out for her lost daughter until she collapsed by a window upstairs. Rumor had it her spirit remained, pacing the corridors at night. One of my friends dismissed it as family folklore, but Sasha told us she had heard footsteps late at night on multiple occasions. She insisted that if you were very quiet, you might hear labored breathing as if someone was scaling the length of the corridor. That supercharged our imaginations, but we decided it was best to treat it like a thrilling story rather than reality. We were 15 years old, prone to scaring ourselves. As the conversation progressed, we noticed a gentle scraping noise outside Sasha's door, like something lightly scratching the wood. We fell silent. The noise stopped. One friend opened the door, half expecting Sasha's cat or dog. Her cat was indeed there, but it just sat a few feet away, staring at us with big, reflective eyes. We laughed in relief, inviting the cat inside. For a moment, we decided that the only ghosts we'd find here had whiskers and a tail. We carried on chatting until we grew tired. People tried to settle into their sleeping bags or the bed, whispering about typical teenage topics, crushes, weekend plans, upcoming exams. Sasha was about to turn off the fairy lights when her phone buzzed with a text. She read it and frowned, saying it was from her mum. "We'll be back soon, forgot extra groceries. If you need us, we're just down the street." That made sense, though none of us had even noticed her parents leaving. Slowly, conversation died down and most of us drifted off to sleep. I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of quiet footsteps outside the bedroom door. They were slow, measured, as if someone tiptoed down the hallway. At first, I assumed Sasha's parents had returned, maybe checking on us. But then I realized how the footsteps kept passing back and forth in front of the door. They never seemed to enter any other room, never went up or down the stairs, just hovered near us. The hair at the back of my neck stood on end. I tried to calm myself, pressing my ears closer to the door to interpret the sound. My friend Gina was also awake, wide-eyed, listening intently. We exchanged a quick, alarmed glance, but neither of us dared to move. A soft shuffle, a soft tap, then silence. Suddenly the doorknob jiggled, not violently, but enough to make it rattle in the quiet. My pulse spiked. Gina let out a muffled gasp. Then, after a heartbeat of panic, a gentle knock sounded, almost timid. We stared at each other, unsure of what to do. My mind raced, hoping it was Sasha's parents. Yet something felt off. The vibe was too strange, too tense. I couldn't bring myself to open the door. We stayed frozen, and whoever was outside didn't knock again. Instead, the slow footsteps resumed, trailing off down the corridor. After a few minutes of strained silence, I managed to fall back into an uneasy sleep. Morning came and cast shafts of sunlight across the floor, revealing that we had all stirred at some point during the night. Sasha found me and Gina awake, and we told her about the footsteps. She shrugged it off, suggesting maybe her parents were checking on us. We decided not to mention the jiggling doorknob. We had breakfast downstairs, half expecting to see Sasha's mom or dad, but the house was oddly empty. Sasha called her mom's phone, and her mother answered, sounding preoccupied. They were still running errands and wouldn't be home until the afternoon. That threw us for a loop. If her parents weren't home, who was in the corridor last night? We sat around the kitchen table, sharing our confusion. Sasha tried to remain calm, but the worry was evident in her eyes. The day passed uneventfully, and her parents finally came home with groceries, apologizing for being out longer than they expected. They said they had gone to a neighboring town for the best deals. We decided not to bring up the odd nighttime visitor, partially because we weren't entirely sure how to explain it without sounding paranoid. The second night of the sleepover, we decided to stay out in the living room, thinking we'd feel more at ease in a communal space. This was a decision rooted in our shared worry, though we pretended it was simpler to watch movies this way. Sasha's parents went to bed early, exhausted from their day. We set up blankets and pillows on the living room floor. The sense of comfort it provided was temporary at best. Deep down, we knew the house was awake with unseen presences, or at least that's how it felt. Around midnight, the power suddenly flickered, bathing the room in darkness. It lasted only a few seconds, but our nerves were on edge. When the lights returned, one of my friends pointed to a shadow by the window, claiming it moved against the flow of the returning illumination. We put it down to fear playing tricks on our minds. But the sense of being watched, a prickling along the spine, never truly left us after that. We tried to distract ourselves by telling some jokes, munching on snacks, and scrolling through our phones. Time dragged on. Eventually, Sasha started to nod off. The rest of us followed suit. Once again, the house settled into that eerie hush, with only the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional groan of the old wooden beams. At some unknown hour, a strangled cry tore through the silence. We jolted upright. The living room was dim, lit only by moonlight filtering through the tall windows. Sasha was trembling on her makeshift bed, eyes wild with terror. She stammered that she saw a woman in the corner near the stairs. The woman was impossibly old, wearing a ragged nightgown with wispy white hair cascading in tangled strands over her stooped shoulders. Her eyes were sunken, but glowed with a mad intensity. Sasha swore the crone extended a skeletal hand toward her, beckoning or maybe demanding something. We were terrified. Scanning the corner Sasha indicated, there was nothing, just empty space and battered wallpaper. Sasha was shaking so badly she could barely speak. We tried to reassure her it was a nightmare, but the room's atmosphere was suffocating. Our hearts pounded in unison. Gina, who was the bravest among us, grabbed a flashlight and shone it along the walls, the floor, the corners. Everything was still except for the pounding of our hearts. That's when we heard a creaking from near the stairs. We directed the flashlight that way, illuminating an empty corridor, but the floorboards groaned as though carrying weight. We stepped closer, forming a tight group, hands linked. Sasha whispered a shaky hello. No answer. The air felt chilled, making every hair on my arm stand up. Suddenly, a muffled rattling came from the door at the far end of that hallway. It was the same door that led to one of the older parts of the house, a room Sasha's parents had barely renovated. The handle turned slowly, as if someone on the other side was testing it. Gathering courage, we advanced, shining the flashlight on the door. The handle kept twisting, left to right, in a sluggish, deliberate pattern. Finally, Gina reached out and yanked the door open. Our flashlight cut into the darkness beyond. The room wasn't large, more like a storage area with dusty shelves. Stacked boxes blocked the far corner. The entire room smelled of mildew and something stale, but there was no one there. We stood motionless, hearing a raspy breathing noise that made our blood run cold. It seemed to come from the far side behind the boxes. The flashlight beam quivered. My stomach churned with dread. Sasha quietly called out, asking who was there. In response, we only heard that ragged breathing intensify. It sounded like labored inhalations, a body struggling to take in air through decrepit lungs. Gina, beyond terrified yet determined, took a step closer. She called out a warning that we were going to alert Sasha's parents. The breathing paused momentarily as if it comprehended. Then a voice, ancient and withered, rasped a single word: daughter. The hair on my neck bristled. We stared at each other, hearts hammering, unsure if we all heard the same thing. Before any of us could respond, a frenzied thumping broke out from behind the boxes. We shrieked, stumbling backward. The door slammed shut of its own accord, nearly catching Sasha's hand. We stood in the hall, paralyzed, as the doorknob continued to rattle. A cackling laugh tore through the wood, an ugly sound that vibrated with malevolence. Our screams finally roused Sasha's parents. They came rushing into the corridor, flicking on every light as they went. The doorknob went still, the laughter ceased, and for the next moment, everything was normal. The storeroom door remained locked from our side. We tearfully recounted what had happened. Sasha's parents, though alarmed, suspected we were panicking from nightmares or letting fear get the better of us. They insisted on searching the room. Her dad opened it carefully, shining his own flashlight around, stepping over dusty boxes. He found nothing. No footprints, no hint that anybody had been there. The only signs of life were spiderwebs in corners and some scattered debris. Trembling, we asked Sasha's parents about the history of the house. Her father admitted that the place had changed hands for generations. One of its original owners had a daughter who died young, and the mother apparently lost her mind. She wandered the halls crying out for her child until she too passed away. Nobody knew for sure how much of it was rumor or fact, but people often spoke of an old wailing figure who occasionally peeked through windows or roamed the corridors at night, searching for someone who could never be found. That was enough for the rest of us. We collected our belongings and convinced our parents to pick us up at dawn. None of us stayed a moment longer than necessary. For weeks, I couldn't sleep without picturing that emaciated, hunched figure Sasha claimed to have seen, her eyes blazing with a vile hunger as she reached out. Maybe Sasha imagined the entire thing. Maybe the footsteps, the rattling door, the cackling laugh had a scientific explanation tied to the creaks of an ancient house. But on nights when the wind howls at my own window, I'm convinced there's a presence just outside, some tormented spirit seeking what it has lost. And I pray it never finds a way in. Story 3. Whisper from the Mirror. I started babysitting at a fairly young age, maybe 13. My neighbor, Miss Karen, trusted me to watch her daughter, Lily, who was close to 9. This arrangement worked well because Miss Karen sometimes allowed Lily to sleep at my house if she ran late at work or had to be out of town. One Friday night, Miss Karen left Lily at my place. We decided it would be fun to invite my cousin Tanya over for an impromptu sleepover. The three of us had dinner, then grew bored, so we searched for something entertaining. My parents were out for an event, so we had the house to ourselves, and the typical unspoken thrill that comes with the fridge full of snacks and no adult supervision. We decided to play with my old board games, rummaging through boxes in the attic. That's when Lily stumbled upon a small mirror wrapped in cloth. It had an ornate, intricate metal frame shaped like intertwined vines. Something about its design caught my eye. The metal was tarnished, giving it a darker, almost bronze hue. None of us recognized it. I couldn't recall seeing it in my previous explorations of the attic. Even so, we shrugged and added it to our stash of interesting finds, taking the mirror down to my bedroom before we forgot about it for a while. The hours passed. We ended up painting our nails, telling jokes, and eventually started a silly little game of Bloody Mary in front of my bathroom mirror. We had read about it and wanted to scare Lily in a playful, harmless way. We turned off the lights, lit a candle, and recited the name 3 times. Nothing happened, of course, so we ended with laughter and teasing. But an unnerving detail was that the face of the reflection behind me seemed to momentarily shift. Just the briefest flicker in the dim candlelight. I assumed it was my imagination or a trick of the shadows. Later, while packing away some clothes, Tanya took out the old mirror we found and propped it up on my vanity table. She said we should try our silly ghost chants on that mirror for an extra thrill. I felt a wave of reluctance. Something about its tarnished frame and dark, reflective surface struck me as ominous. It was thinner and more distorted than typical modern mirrors, almost giving the reflection a slight warp. But Lily and Tanya insisted, so we set the mirror upright on my bed, turned off the lights again, and lit some candles for the same dramatic effect. We repeated the chants. Again, nothing dramatic occurred, but Lily shrieked, claiming a shape flickered at the left corner of the reflection. Tanya and I tried to see it, but all we caught was a momentary ripple, like a faint distortion in the glass. We teased Lily for spooking herself, but a sense of unease trickled through me. The reflection in the old mirror was somehow heavier, like gazing into a pool of water at night. We left it on my desk, raised the lights, tried to brush off the creepiness, and promised ourselves we'd do something else fun. However, that mirror lingered at the back of my mind. As the night wore on, we huddled in my room watching some comedic videos. Lily fell asleep first, curled up in her sleeping bag. With her out, Tanya and I continued chatting quietly. At some point, she grew serious and asked if I felt weird about that mirror. She admitted she sensed it wasn't just an inanimate object. She said she kept feeling a cold prickle every time she glanced its way, as though it watched us. I laughed it off, calling it an overactive imagination, but deep down I agreed the mirror gave me the creeps. We eventually turned off the lights. The only illumination was the electronic glow from my alarm clock. I drifted in and out of sleep. At some point I awakened, clammy and confused, sensing a presence in my room. I glanced at the small mirror, seeing it dimly outlined against the shadows. I noticed a faint shimmer, like a reflection, but I couldn't pinpoint its source. My heart thumped. Then I heard a whisper. It was impossible to decipher the words, but the tone was urgent, almost pleading. I listened, straining my ears. It seemed to come from the direction of the mirror. I rolled over, trying to dismiss it as my mind playing tricks. But the whisper came again, louder, carrying a strange echo. My blood ran cold. I shook Tanya awake, trying not to alarm Lily. Whispering my fears, I urged Tanya to listen. We both strained our ears. There it was again, a faint hiss that almost formed syllables. Tanya's eyes widened in terror. We moved closer to each other, too afraid to do anything about it. We sat in silence, hearts hammering, until eventually the whispering ceased. We somehow convinced ourselves to sleep, though neither of us rested much. Morning light brought a sense of relief. The mirror looked ordinary again. Tanya was dead set on returning it to the attic. I agreed wholeheartedly. Lily, however, was curious, wanting to keep it as a novelty. She teased us for being scared cats. We humored her by letting her hold it one more time. She angled it to catch the rays of sunlight, saying it looked pretty. We pretended to be uninterested, eager to rid ourselves of its presence. Then Lily got bored and placed it on my desk. We had breakfast, played video games, and momentarily forgot about our nighttime fright. That afternoon, Miss Karen arrived to pick Lily up. My parents and Miss Karen chatted, so Lily ran upstairs to grab her things. She came down excitedly, mirror in hand, pleading with her mom to let her take it home. Her mother smiled, thinking it was a harmless old trinket, and asked if it belonged to my mother. My mother said she had never seen it before, and if Lily wanted it, that was okay. Despite my uneasy feeling, I didn't protest out loud. A part of me felt relief at having it out of my house. Lily left with it, oblivious to our concerns. Tanya shot me a worried glance, but we shrugged it off. We had rid ourselves of the mirror, or so we thought. 3 nights later, Miss Karen frantically knocked on our door. My parents answered, and I overheard them speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Miss Karen was on the verge of tears. Lily had been found in the bathroom, wide-eyed and unresponsive, staring at the old mirror. When her mother tried to snap her out of it, Lily began screaming, repeating something about a face in the reflection trying to come through and take her away. Now Lily refused to eat, wouldn't let go of the mirror, and repeatedly claimed the spirit inside needed her help to escape. My parents summoned me for an explanation. I told them everything about discovering the mirror in our attic, about how we messed around with silly chants, about how we heard whispering at night. Miss Karen was horrified. She pleaded for us to take the mirror back, to do something to remove the hold it seemed to have on Lily. We didn't know what to do. My parents tried to calm Miss Karen, suggesting they contact a professional or at least seek some kind of psychological help for Lily. A day later, Miss Karen came back, returning the mirror to our house. She told us Lily had nearly broken down in hysteria at the loss of it, but had quieted eventually. The mirror was wrapped in the same cloth, only now the surface was scratched in multiple places. Miss Karen said Lily had carved something on the metal frame with a small screwdriver. Upon closer inspection, I saw faint etchings that resembled letters or symbols. They didn't make any sense to me, but the sight of them made the pit in my stomach grow. That night, my parents demanded the mirror stay locked away. They put it in the garage for safekeeping until they could figure out how best to dispose of it. The day after, while rummaging in the garage, my dad discovered the cloth thrown aside and the mirror cracked in several places. I was the only one inside the house at the time, and I had not gone near the garage. Possibly the glass had cracked due to temperature fluctuations, or so my dad rationalized, but the creeping suspicion that something else was at play gnawed at me. My cousin Tanya stayed over that evening to keep me company. We ventured out to the garage, hearts pounding, prepared to get rid of the mirror ourselves. But when we tried picking it up, we noticed a pungent smell seeping from the cracks like rotting leaves mixed with stagnant water. Tanya gagged. She turned the mirror over, searching for any hidden compartments or moisture, found nothing. When we turned it face up again, the reflection was horribly distorted. Clumps of blackish discoloration had spread beneath the fractured glass, forming shapes reminiscent of eyes, a mouth, a twisted human face. It was only for an instant, but we both saw it. Then, as if it registered our presence, faint lines spread outward, branching like veins. We dropped the mirror, letting it clatter onto the concrete floor. A horrifying moan came from nowhere and everywhere at once, reverberating through the enclosed space of the garage. We bolted inside the house, slamming the door behind us. Tanya was in tears. I was shaking, nearly hyperventilating. My parents demanded to know what happened. We sputtered out the details, stumbling over our words, describing the face we thought we saw appear in the mirror. My dad decided enough was enough. He grabbed his toolkit, marched to the garage, and shattered the mirror entirely, beating it with a hammer until it was shards and twisted metal. The wailing moan that followed made the hair on my arms stand up. I'll never forget that sound, like an agonized spirit losing its anchor to the world. We gathered the remains in a garbage bag and immediately disposed of it at the local waste facility, wanting to ensure that mirror was far from our home. Afterward, an uncanny stillness settled over the entire house, as though the tension that gripped it had finally lifted. I heard nothing more of whispers or moans, though I had nightmares for weeks. Lily eventually recovered. Her mother told me that once the mirror was gone, Lily almost forgot it existed. She retained only a vague memory of seeing something dark in its reflection and feeling oddly compelled to help it. Over time, she seemed to block out that entire episode. I never did figure out how that mirror ended up in my attic. My parents said it might have been left behind by the previous owners. Or perhaps it was older than that, passed down from occupant to occupant. Whatever the case, I'm certain it was a doorway for something fiendish. I learned a powerful lesson. Sometimes it's best to leave forgotten relics where they lie. If you ever come across an odd antique mirror, be wary. You never know what might be peering back at you, waiting for the chance to escape. Story 4. The Unsleeping Eyes. My best friend Erica had an end-of-year birthday party that coincided with the first day of our summer break. She lived in a ranch-style home with her mother, father, and 2 older brothers. For the big day, her parents arranged a barbecue for her friends, complete with a bounce house for the younger guests, plus music and a night of campfire stories in the backyard. Since I was her closest friend, they allowed me and a few other girls to have a sleepover in the living room. The house bustled with excitement that evening, the smell of grilled hamburgers and hot dogs lingering in the warm summer air. As night fell, a few people had left, but a handful remained around the fire pit telling scary stories. We kids sat in a circle, the dancing flames reflecting in our wide eyes as we took turns spooking each other. I noticed the fence line around Erica's backyard was quite tall, overshadowed by drooping tree limbs. Beyond that was a dense stretch of forest that seemed to absorb the darkness, giving nothing back but the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Something about that thick, dark boundary unsettled me, though I couldn't say why. Eventually, Erica's parents retired to their room, leaving us big kids in the living room with instructions to keep our voices down and not to stay up too late. We had the typical teenage plan: watch a movie, chat about life, and stay awake until we couldn't keep our eyes open. The living room was spacious, with a large sliding glass door that opened to the backyard. Through that glass, I could still see faint embers glowing in the fire pit, as well as the looming silhouette of trees. We spread out our sleeping bags and started the movie, something comedic to wash away the residual creepiness from the fireside tales. After about an hour, we grew bored and turned it off, deciding to talk about our upcoming summer plans instead. One friend spoke of going to camp, another was traveling overseas, while I mentioned I'd probably spend most days at home reading or exploring the local park. Erica excitedly announced she was going on a family road trip. She brimmed with anticipation, describing the places she'd visit. Suddenly, a faint scratching noise pulled our attention to the sliding glass door. It was a feeble sound, like something lightly scraping along the screen. We turned our eyes in unison. Outside, we saw only darkness. One of us joked it was probably a raccoon. Still, the moment was tense. We approached cautiously. Erica flicked on the porch light, illuminating the empty backyard. The scratch came again, but now from lower on the door. We twisted the handle and slid the door open a crack, calling out a tentative hello. No creature scurried away, no wind kicked up dust. It was just emptiness and a faint, quick rustle near the fence. Maybe it was an animal, and the porch light scared it off. We shut the door, locked it, and retreated inside, trying to laugh it off. It didn't feel particularly scary then, just odd. We turned our attention to a card game, letting our worries slip away. As the game progressed, minutes turned to hours, and one by one, my friends dozed off. Eventually, only I was awake, staring at the last flickers of the television screen before shutting it off. Darkness enveloped the living room, broken only by the faint glow of a street lamp filtering through the front window. Half asleep, I lay back on my sleeping bag, idly gazing out the sliding glass door. The porch light was still on, casting a weak glow on the wooden deck. That was when I noticed something peculiar near the fence. 2 dim, reflective spots. They hovered at a height, suggesting a pair of eyes. I stared, unsure if I was imagining it. The faint orbs moved slightly, bobbing in the shadows, then disappeared behind a tree. My pulse quickened. I reasoned it could be a stray cat or a small animal perched on something. Even so, an uncomfortable chill crawled along my spine. I willed myself to close my eyes, telling myself there was no real danger. Sleep came in fits, nightmares swirling in my half-lucid mind. In one dream, I was in the backyard, consumed by an all-encompassing darkness. Two pale eyes hovered inches from my face, silently judging, seeing me for what I was, small, vulnerable, and alone. I awakened with a gasp, heart racing. The living room was silent, my friends slumbering around me. Through the glass door, dawn's earliest light was creeping in. I fell asleep again, too exhausted to keep watch. The following day was calm. Erica's parents cooked us breakfast and we parted ways with laughter, promising to meet up again soon. But that night, Erica called me, her voice trembling. She told me she saw the same pair of eyes at the fence while taking out the trash. At first she had noticed a rustle in the tall grass, and then those orbs flickered like small, reflective discs, peering at her over the fence. She ran inside, terrified. When her dad investigated, there was nobody there. In the days that followed, Erica texted me updates. Sometimes she'd hear scraping noises against the side of the house at night, or faint tapping on her window. Once she thought she saw the silhouette of a figure hunched near the fence, too tall to be a dog, but not tall enough to be an adult human. She was torn between thinking it was an intruder or something not entirely human. Her parents began to grow concerned. They installed a motion-sensitive floodlight in the backyard. They found footprints in the soft earth near the fence, elongated impressions as if the feet had abnormally long toes. Erica sent me a blurry photo of the prints, and a spike of dread ran down my spine. About a week after the sleepover, I came over again to keep Erica company. She seemed on edge, exhausted from nights of poor sleep. Her parents were supportive, but unsure how to handle the situation. They suspected a prowler or a wild animal, but the footprints were bizarre. That night, we tried to stay calm, playing board games in the living room. Her brothers teased us for being paranoid. The atmosphere was tense, every little noise making us jump. Around midnight, we heard the motion light click on. We stiffened. Erica and I crept to the window that faced the backyard, afraid to open the sliding door. We peered out into the lit yard, hearts pounding. At first, we saw only the empty deck, the faint glimmer of the fence, and the looming shadow of the trees. Then, near the far left corner, something crouched. It was a hunched figure, limbs too long, body draped in tattered clothing or fur. The yard light illuminated part of its face. The skin looked pale, almost gray, with huge reflective eyes that seemed void of emotion. They glimmered, turning right toward us. We let out a muffled scream and ducked behind the curtain. Seconds later, we dared to look again. The figure had vanished, leaving only the swaying branches behind. Shaking all over, we woke Erica's parents, who rushed outside with flashlights. They found nothing except the footprints. This time, the prints trailed across the yard, ending abruptly by the fence where the grass was pressed down. It was as if the creature had vaulted over the fence or disintegrated into thin air. Her parents dialed the police, who arrived, took a cursory look, and wrote down statements. They seemed dubious, labeling it a potential trespasser or a stray dog. Even so, I overheard one officer telling Erica's dad that he had never seen footprints quite like those. Erica's parents decided we shouldn't sleep in the living room anymore. They put us up in Erica's bedroom, where we locked the doors and closed the windows tightly. We took shifts staying awake, fueled by adrenaline and fear. Around 3 in the morning, with the house silent, I heard a faint clicking noise at Erica's window. I summoned the courage to peek through the curtains. In the glow of a streetlight, I saw the top of something's head pressed to the glass, large eyes angled upward. It was as if it was standing on something outside, trying to peer in. I let out a gasp that woke Erica. She switched on the lights and we peered again, but the figure was gone. In its place, we spotted greasy smudges on the outside of the window, like an oily residue left by skin or fur. Whatever it was, it had been mere inches from us, separated only by a thin sheet of glass. We spent the rest of the night wide awake, hearts hammering. Over the course of the summer, sightings continued sporadically. Erica's family had specialists examine the footprints. Some concluded they were inconclusive, possibly a large dog with splayed paws, or a misinterpretation based on how the soil had been disturbed. But Erica and I were convinced otherwise. Her parents eventually constructed a taller fence and installed security cameras, which recorded fleeting glimpses of a pale, elongated shape darting across the yard late at night. The footage was grainy, but it was enough to send chills through anyone who saw it. The big blank eyes captured in a single frame said it all. Something not quite human lurked in the neighborhood. Eventually the sighting stopped. Perhaps it moved on, found new hunting grounds, or decided to remain hidden. Even so, Erica and her family never left the sliding door unlocked again. To this day, she double-checks every window latch. During daylight, the yard is an innocent patch of grass and a simple wooden fence. But at night, she swears she sometimes hears faint scraping sounds outside, as if unsleeping eyes still linger in the darkness, always watching, always waiting. There was a small group of us, myself, Becca and Charlie, who formed a tight-knit trio. One weekend we decided to have a sleepover at Charlie's place. He lived in a quaint two-story home on the outskirts of our town, close to a wooded area. It was a cozy place, always smelling like fresh-baked bread because Charlie's mum was an avid baker. For fun, Charlie suggested we play a game his older cousin had taught him, something called Doorway Dare. The premise was that you'd stand in a darkened doorway at midnight, recite a chant 3 times, and wait for the so-called guardian of thresholds to appear. It was supposed to be just another silly ghost game, like the many variations of calling out spirits we'd tried over the years. We planned to do the dare around midnight after Charlie's mom went to bed. Becca was all for it because she loved paranormal challenges, while I was a bit more skeptical but agreed to join in for the thrill. The evening started like most sleepovers. Pizza, video games, random conversations, and a couple of comedic movies to lighten the mood. As midnight drew near, an undercurrent of nervous excitement rippled through us. The clock struck 12, and we gathered at the threshold between the kitchen and the living room, which was a wide doorway framed by old wood. We switched off the lights, allowing only the moonlight from the living room window to glimmer on the floor. According to Charlie, the steps were stand in the doorway, hold hands, and recite the chant. Together, it went something like, "Guardian at the boundary, keeper of what lies within and without, show us your face, hear us now." We repeated it 3 times, our voices trembling with a mixture of fear and amusement. For a long moment, nothing happened. We felt silly, giggling in the darkness. Then Becca stiffened, saying she felt a breeze pass through the doorway, though no windows were open. I tried to sense it too, but the air felt still. Charlie insisted we stand quietly to see if anything else might occur. We waited, straining our eyes and ears, but eventually we lost patience or nerve. We flicked the lights back on, teased each other about jumping at shadows, and concluded the so-called guardian was a no-show. We retreated to Charlie's room, feeling a bit disappointed. That's when strange things started. First, Bobby, Charlie's dog, paced restlessly outside the bedroom, whining and scratching at the door. This was unusual. Bobby was normally calm. Charlie checked on him, found nothing obviously wrong, and tried to settle him down. Then we heard a faint tapping noise from overhead. It sounded like someone was tapping their knuckles against the ceiling. With furrowed brows, we looked at each other, hearts picking up speed. Charlie's house had an attic, but it was mostly used for storage. No one in his family went up there at night unless absolutely necessary. Charlie convinced us it was probably just the house settling. Eventually, we resumed our conversation. The tapping repeated, more deliberate this time, as if someone was dragging nails across floorboards above us. The hairs on my arms prickled. Without a word, we grabbed flashlights and decided to investigate. We tiptoed upstairs, then up the narrow staircase that led to the attic. The air was stale, and everything was coated in a layer of dust. Boxes, old furniture, and seasonal decorations filled the cramped space. We shone our flashlights around, seeing only the usual stored items. The tapping noise had stopped. Satisfied it was empty, we headed back down. We made it to Charlie's bedroom when the lights flickered. The house groaned audibly, like a heavy weight shifting within. The temperature seemed to drop. My breath caught in my throat. Something felt off, like the air was charged with a dark energy. Even Charlie, always the brave one, looked pale. Suddenly, the bedroom door slammed shut, rattling the walls. We jumped, adrenaline surging. Becca tried turning the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge, as if someone was holding it from the other side. We pounded on the door, calling for Charlie's mum, but no one answered. Then a voice, low and resonant, seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, asking a simple question: "Why have you summoned me?" The voice vibrated through our bodies, more felt than heard. We stood in terrified silence. I managed to stammer that we didn't mean any harm, that it was just a game. The voice let out a long sigh, or maybe a growl. Then it said something about invitation and toll, words we couldn't fully piece together in our fear. The overhead light flickered again, casting jumping shadows around the room. Becca looked over her shoulder at the corner of the bedroom, and she froze. In the faint illumination, I saw what she was staring at. A shape materializing against the wall. It was tall, slender, with a featureless face. Its outline was made of swirling dark mist. The figure extended an arm, pointing a bony hand in our direction. In that moment, I regretted every silly chant, every game we'd ever played that tried to lure spirits. This was no teenage prank. We were confronted with something beyond our understanding. Charlie gripped my arm so tightly it hurt, none of us could speak. The figure took a step forward, silent, yet impossibly real. That's when Bobby started barking like mad from the hallway. The door shook with his frantic effort to get in. The figure halted, turning its head slightly toward the sound. Then with a sudden whoosh, it dissolved into a black swirl, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. The door to the bedroom clicked open, swinging wide. Bobby barreled in, sniffing wildly, tail between his legs. We stood there, hearts pounding, tears brimming in our eyes. The hallway beyond was empty, quiet, normal. Charlie's mum rushed up the stairs, groggy but alarmed by the commotion. We tried to form an explanation, but how could we? She led us downstairs, gave us water, and tried to calm us, suspecting we had a collective nightmare or were simply spooking each other. We spent the rest of the night in the living room, lights on, the TV turned low for background comfort. None of us slept much, expecting that shape to return, but it didn't. By morning we felt numb, reluctant to discuss what we had seen. The day found us in a haze, uncertain if it had all really happened. Yet from that point onward, Charlie's house felt different. Random knocks on doors, flickering lights, cold spots. Once Charlie texted that he saw a black shape vanish around a corner when he came home from school. Becca claimed continued nightmares of the faceless figure looming over her bed. It was as if by playing that silly game, we had truly invited something across a threshold, granting it permission to linger among us. Over time, the disturbances faded, but an unsettling aura never completely left Charlie's home. To this day, I refuse to play any game involving a doorway or a mirror. The memory of that swirling figure, the deep voice resonating through the walls, haunts me still. We learned the hard way that actions have consequences. Some doors, once opened, can never fully be shut. And sometimes a dare is more than just a game. It's an invitation with a steep price. Thank you for joining Whispering Reapers for these 5 unsettling accounts of how even the simplest sleepover can become a descent into terror. Each of these stories shows that there are moments when the normal and the supernatural collide in ways we least expect. Whether it's a shadowy figure peering through a window, a spirit lurking in an antique mirror, or an ancient presence summoned through a childish game, the scariest part about these tales is how they remind us that horror can strike in familiar places we've always trusted. So when you arrange your next cozy gathering with friends, remember that the walls around you might harbor unseen watchers, that gentle creak in the night, that chill breeze wafting through the room, that flicker at the edge of your vision. They could mean more than meets the eye. Perhaps some stories are merely illusions of a heightened imagination. But then again, perhaps not everything that knocks on the window at midnight is of this world. Let us know in the comments which part of these stories you found the most terrifying. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, Whispering Reapers, for more chilling tales and spine-tingling encounters. Until next time, sleep tight, and keep a wary ear open for those things that go bump in the night.